It was basically a protracted civil war going all the way from the 20s to the 1940s. Was just as bloody, just as radical. The Russian experience, Mao went even further in China with the movements like the Great Leap Forward. There was an attempt to industrialize China. It resulted in a lot of famine. There was a movement to put it for like small farmers. You would put iron smelters and furnaces and things like that, so small farmers could produce iron. Now it was horrible quality iron and steel, but he could say we produce more steel than the United States, or we produce more steel than so and so this year. So again, it's very much like the idea of what Stalin was doing. The Cultural Revolution we mentioned some time ago. Stalin sort of wanted to mold Chinese culture. Mao wanted to mold Chinese culture in his own image and what he believed into. He basically turned young people against sort of the old established ways. Against, they would take teachers and college professors and even people's parents, put them up on stage and sort of humiliate them and get them to admit that they were extremists or rightists, etc. And this reflects the sort of terror that you had in the Russian Civil War. Now, both societies had to move past after the deaths of these leaders. When Stalin died in 1953, Stalin died. There was a de-Stalinization program to scale back all the terror that he used. But Mao passed away. The Chinese leaders had to sort of go back and redress a lot of those problems that occurred. Again, here another exorbitant death toll that we have no idea. It depends on who you read. It depends on it could have been from famine and executions. It could have been anywhere between 20 million and 70 million. Again, we don't know. Once you start piling on the millions, it really just kind of numbs your mind. And again, we know the experience of Pol Pot in Cambodia with the killing fields. That was another communist revolution that really was typified by drastic domestic change. Our people were taken, and basically everyone moved to the country to create a giant farm. How that really syncs with communism, I'm not too sure, but again, that was another sort of activity. So I'm concentrating mainly on communism here. I have a few slides up on fascism and Nazism as far as 20th century ideologies go, but I think this presents a really good, a really kind of stringent example as to how this all came about, how these political religions impacted the people who believed in them. We'll come back to, let's kind of mention this. Now, we talked about sort of how socialism, Marx's original idea, was changed and, if you will, corrupted or turned into something different by Stalin and Lenin and others. Now, was this, we had this question, was communism just a good system that was run by bad and evil people, or is it flawed from the beginning? So, I don't know if anyone has any ideas on that. No? Well, I'll give you my take, anyway. There was a book written called The Road to Serfdom by a liberal economist, F.A. Hayek, or Friedrich Hayek, in which he kind of did a study of communism. He wrote a chapter, Why the Worst Get on Top. And if you take the drastic measures needed to enact communism. Now, let's take the confiscation of private property, for example. If I come up to your house and I say, guess what? We're all going to communism. So I need basically your private property. Oh, and you're not going to get a paycheck anymore. We're just going to kind of put your labor into a common pool, and we're going to take it out. You're probably going to tell me to go play in the traffic. You're going to tell me to get the hell out. So there's really no nice way to go about implementing this when people don't want it. So there was always a core of people in these nations that experienced revolution that didn't want communism. And just like any political any time you try and enact a political measure, there are people who will oppose it. The problem with communism and the socialism is the transformation they want to achieve is so drastic that there's really no nice way of implementing them. You have to seize people's property, and if they don't go along with you, you can kill them. You have a question?
Yeah, I think that you're right in that that's how communism has to be violent because at the war, you can't like just magically say, we're going to take a little bit of your property. I mean, people call like Obama like a socialist because of the tax policies, and then you have like lots of like Boston Tea Party type things like in recent years. So I think that's not really a system that's corrupt, that's ruled by bad people. It's just a flawed system that you can't concentrate on.
Unless we forget, Marx's original plan was for a violent revolution. It was called revolutionary socialism for a reason. So, again, this question is, I'm presenting kind of one aspect of it, or one sort of possible answer to this question. There are certainly others, if you think about it, but. So yeah, there's really no way to kind of go about this in a humane and soft manner. The impact of when we call political religions that they are attempts to realize a sort of heaven on earth or to completely revolutionize society kind of poses this question: do these failures, not just failures, but atrocities that occurred in communism, should they temper our attempts to in the lengths we should go to improve the world? I think this goes to ideas of, how much do we know? How much can we discover through political thought and political science? I mean, can we achieve a perfect understanding of what the perfect world will be and what paradise will be? And can we even apply that to everyone on Earth? So it seems to me that a system of, letting people do what they want and figure it out for themselves is a little better than trying to regiment or trying to achieve a paradise that only a few people really believe in. That's another question. These are questions to think about when you look back on the 20th century and look back on history. We have a few minutes. I want to get really quickly to sort of fascism. I only have a few slides on it, but when we talk about 20th century ideologies, we often see fascism and communism as kind of two sides of the same totalitarian coin. And fascism was communism is deemed as a totalitarian ideology from the right or from the left. Fascism is deemed as a totalitarian ideology from the right, and it is a combination of extreme nationalism, militarism, and socialism. And it grew alongside communism, but it was opposed to it for very much of it. The fascists always talked, and the Nazis especially, always talked about the evil, awful Bolsheviks and communists. And the communists always talked about the horrible and evil fascists. Now, when Germany and Russia allied with each other in 1939, there was a funny political cartoon. I'm kicking myself for not putting it up here, where Hitler goes up to Stalin and says, "The scum of the earth, I presume," and Hitler goes, "Yes, the evil capitalist, imperialist pigs, I imagine." And so they're talking to each other very politely, but in this, but calling each other these evil names, etc. Fascism, unlike communism, it espouses nationalism, militarism, imperialism. Basically says that a society that, rather than looking to class conflict or to achieve an economic paradise, we have to look at our nation. Or we have to look at our race, and through our race consciousness, we can achieve a great, living paradise. And certainly the Nazis kind of saw this as the success of the master race, the Aryan race. As comes from the idea of the fascism comes from the word fasces, which was a bundle of wooden rods that people called lictors would carry around in ancient Rome. And lictors always accompanied the really important, powerful officials. And it basically depicts imperial power. And in Italy, fascism was we're going to bring back the Roman Empire. We're going to achieve this great, the Italians, we've been oppressed and split up for so long, but we're going to go back and bring back the Roman Empire. So they invaded Ethiopia. And I'm really not sure, they also invaded Albania and Libya. So if that's the Roman Empire, they can see that these are attempts to make themselves look strong. National Socialism, or as it's called, Nazism, it was based around this idea of German supremacy, the supremacy of the Aryan race, the Germanic people, white people. It is again, German term meaning National Socialism. The Nazis always despised Bolshevism as a Jewish conspiracy, but they also considered Jews to be practitioners of capitalism and evil. The stereotype of the money-lending, greedy Jew was very important. It was alongside the communist conspirator, and so they used the Jews as scapegoats in all of their sort of plots, and they incorporated a great number of socialist ideas and rhetoric. Like Stalin, they wanted a regimented society that was all grouped together and that was all working toward one goal. There's this term authoritarianism or totalitarianism. And you often hear, Hitler talking about equity of wealth and making, joining the classes together, much like the communists would have. They presented an ideal world that the Germans could achieve if they had the will to conquer and destroy and enslave the inferior races of the world. Mainly the Jews, but Gypsies, Slavs, Russians, etc. So I don't need to go in, I think, to the crimes of the Nazis. They're pretty well documented with the Holocaust and persecution, slave labor, etc. But again, you have this question: how could a society that was sophisticated and educated, and in the 19th century, Germany was considered an extremely liberal, extremely free society, how could it have committed, how could it regress to this barbarity that we see? And I think the answer, and many other people think this answer, lies in political ideology, in pursuing political religion, and believing in something so strongly that you're willing to do the most depraved and horrible things in order to achieve it. Now, there was a famous French author named Francois Furet who argued that socialism in one country, Stalinism, and National Socialism are basically two sides of the same evil coin. They're both totalitarian twins. They espoused murder and terror in order to achieve important goals. They wanted to gain their society. I mention this just as kind of an aside, but again, there are more, I would say more scholars tend to think of them as being diametrically opposed to each other. But one thing I do have, this is a reading from a book called The War of the World. It's a history of 20th century conflict, and it incorporates part of a diary entry. Enrica Lapko was just 12 years old when she, her mother, and elder brother were deported from Ulanwaka, which is in Poland. It happened in the middle of a bitterly cold night of February 10th, 1940. Here the diary begins. Suddenly came the rapping at our door. What offenses had we committed? Where, what for, and why did we have to leave our home and farm at this time and in such weather? But the assistant quickly spurred us into action, as the sledges with our very sparse possessions, which we had packed in just under an hour. Thus we moved off towards the station. Similar loads of families in bundles left every house. In the cattle trucks, there huddled together grown-ups and children, men, women, friends, and strangers. There was no means of washing or changing for the night, no food, cold and hungry. We felt like animals caught in a trap, unsure what the next day would bring, or when or where this journey would end, for no one knew our destination. Now this is, again, this deportation from Poland. You would think on the face of it that people being herded to cattle cars, that it's a representation of the Holocaust. But this was actually on the other side of Poland, and all these people were deported to Siberia by the Russians in 1940. So we see this split of Central Europe, these totalitarian empires. And really, you kind of have to think about them as they were so seemingly different, but they were so much the same in what they wanted to accomplish and how they were. It's kind of a somber lecture talking about atrocities and violence and all that. But I think it helps us understand how political thought, and especially political ideology, can be used and can be experienced. So, yeah, that's it. Okay, well, thank you all for listening. Again, I have office hours on Monday. If you need to come in, I'm also able to meet after tonight, so, or after class today, so.
Thursday the review?
Yeah, Thursday's review.
Okay, and is there going to be the reshowing of the videos this week, or was that last week?
I'm not sure.
I got named